Now it is. Namasadase, Namasadasaspataye. I am once again thanking the organizers for asking me to address this august audience. I am going to talk about Veda Vaibhavam, that is glory of Vedas. The glory of Vedas has been understood, has been appreciated by several scholars both in India and outside India. If Indian scholars, the Prachina gurus like Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva, and the contemporaries now like Vivekananda, Aurobindo, and others, if they are extolling the glory of Vedas, then it is not at all surprising for us because all our sects and subsects within Hinduism have one thing common: we all have our roots in Vedas. Therefore, even though there are different sampradayas, we are one in one thing, that in claiming, in acclaiming that Vedas are supreme. But what is surprising is that so many scholars outside India who do not come in the tradition of respecting Vedas, who come across Vedas as just an object of study, if they are attracted to Vedas and if they say that Vedas are supreme, then there is something more in it, and that is what we are going to see today. And the list of admirers of Vedas is a long list. That list includes several eminent persons, persons who have gained eminence in several walks of life, from several professions. And I am giving a sub-list there. I am starting with Professor Schrödinger, a great physicist, a Nobel laureate, winner of Nobel Prize from Austria. We will learn more about the eminence of these persons later. Let me first go through the list now. Then we have M. Maeterlinck from Belgium, who is also a receiver of Nobel Prize. Then we have Henry David Thoreau, American philosopher. Then we have Jean Lee Mime, a French author, Arthur Schopenhauer, a German philosopher, R.W. Emerson, an American poet, Dr. Annie Besant, a woman speaker, Will Durant, an American historian, Alfred North Whitehead, a British mathematician, F. Max Muller, a German philologist, Louis F. Jacoliot, a French official, Rudolf Steiner, an Austrian architect, Herman Melville, an American novelist, Ella Wheeler Wilcox, an American woman poet, Paul William Roberts, a Canadian television producer, David Frawley, an American writer, Dara Shikoh, a prince when Mohammedans ruled India, H.M. Hindman, a British publicist, Sir John Woodroffe, a British advocate, Paul Thiem, a German Indologist, Dick Teresi, who lives along with us now, an American author. What do they say about Vedas? We are going to see many excerpts from different books, but I have collected some important words mentioned by them about Vedas. They say that Vedas are most ancient. They are unparalleled in literature. Vedas are sublime, vast, pure, lofty, divine, primitive, thoroughly scientific, wonderful, eternal, unfathomable, unbroken chain, astonishing, majestic, august, sacred, terrible, full of solemn anguish, condensed wit, God revealed, most advanced, essential, immortal, and invaluable treasure. This is what those foreigners are saying about Vedas. Next. They are also adding, it's a great wave, it is forever valid, it is a reservoir, it is a luminary, it is solitary, it is having splendor, and it is the book that is first ever known to man. I am dividing this talk into 5 parts. The first part is about the antiquity of Vedas, to say that Vedas are very ancient. Vedas are among the oldest books. Many researchers have struggled to find the date of Vedas. Max Muller says Vedic age is between 1200 BC and 1500 BC. Keith and MacDonald, 2 different researchers, have come to the same conclusion that Vedic age is between 1200 before Christ and 2000 before Christ. Whitney and some others, they say that Vedic age is before 2000 BC. Winternids, a German researcher, says Vedic age is between 2000 BC and 2500 BC. Jacobi says that the Vedic age is between 3000 BC and 4000 BC. Next. Satyavrata Samashrami says the Vedic saint Kasha Kritsna has lived before 5000 years, and therefore Veda cannot be brought after him. Lokamanya Bala Gangadhar Tilak says that Vedic age is between 6000 BC and 10,000 BC, and his evidences are mostly astronomical. Sampurnananda says that the Vedic age is between 18,000 BC and 30,000 BC. Pandit Krishna Shastri Godbal concludes that Vedic age is before 18,000 BC. Avinash Chandradas Mukhopadhyaya has written a book determining the Vedic age to be between 25,000 BC and 50,000 BC. Lele Shastri says that Vedic age is between 40,000 BC and 54,000 BC. Rajapur Patankar Shastri says that Vedic age is approximately 21,000 BC, and his main reason is about the floods in the Saraswati river. Next. Pavaki says that Vedic age is before 2,40,000 years. And Pandit Dinanath Shastri says Vedic age must be before 3 lakhs years. Dr. Jwala Prasad says that Vedic age should be before 5 lakhs years. And Nobel laureate Matter Link says that Vedic age is before 70 lakhs years. And Maharshi Dayananda says that the Vedic age must be before 200 crores years. And his reasoning is that Veda was there when the world was created. This is the age of the world, and therefore that should be the age of the Vedas. Next. When people are giving so many different dates for Vedas, how do they conclude that their conclusion is the right one? I start with Max Muller. Max Muller writes, whether Vedic hymns were composed in 1000 or 1500 or 2000 or 3000 BC, no power on earth will ever determine. I have exactly quoted his words. He is only making a proposal that let it be 1200. That's all. Because it cannot be brought even below that. This is what Max Muller himself writes. Next. Same Max Muller writes, I have repeatedly dwelt on the merely hypothetical character of the dates. Merely hypothetical, which I have ventured to assign to the first periods of Vedic literature. This, he writes, when some other researchers criticized Max Muller for unnecessarily bringing down without any reason the age of the Vedas among themselves. The other foreigners are criticizing him. To them he replies that this is only of a hypothetical character. I do not stand by, by that. I do not swear by that. Next. A.B. Keith, who has written History of Sanskrit Literature and who has edited books on Vedas translation. Arthur Berriedale Keith, 1879 to 1944, Regius Professor of Sanskrit, University of Edinburgh. He, even though he says it is 2000 BC, finally he gives up his own conclusion, says that we cannot decide. It's just a guesswork. Next. Max Muller again. In the Rig Veda, we shall have before us more real antiquity than in all the inscriptions of Egypt or Nineveh. The Veda is the oldest book in existence. Only that much we can say. Date we cannot decide. Next. Will Durant, a famous American historian, writes, Upanishads are the oldest extant philosophy and psychology of our race. The surprisingly subtle and patient effort of man to understand the mind and the world. This is what Upanishad is all about. To understand the mind, that is why it is psychology. To understand the world, that is why it is philosophy. Next. This is Will Durant. He is considered by others as one of the most recognized historians of the entire world. Will Durant is a famous historian. Next. What do we say? The traditional view. Traditional view is Vedas are eternal. Vedas themselves declare Vacha, Virupa, Nityaya, Vrishneya Chodasva Sushtutim. These are praises offered to God, and these are Nitya, eternal. Next. Stephen Knapp, he is so much attracted by the Vedic philosophy that he converted his name as Nanda Nandana Dasa. He is actually Stephen Knapp. Next. He says that the Vedic philosophy contains the oldest spiritual texts of any religion in the world. Jacoliot, about whom I have talked in the morning also, he writes, in point of authenticity, the Vedas have incontestable precedence over the most ancient records. We cannot contest that at all. No historian is disagreeing with that. Next. Swami Dayananda Saraswati, he is described by others as a human dynamo because he violently attacked the critics of Vedas. He wrote, our Vedas are earliest books. Deshika says, Prachinanam Shruti Parishadam. They are old, they are ancient. Next. I am now coming to part 2, second part of the 5 parts. Bequeathment of Vedas. Bequeathment means the way in which they have been transferred to posterity. Next. This is from Jean Mealy. The pyramids have been eroded by the desert wind, the marble broken by earthquakes, and the gold stolen by robbers, while the Veda, unlike the pyramid, unlike the marble, unlike the gold, is recited daily by an unbroken chain of generations, traveling like a great wave through the living substance of the mind. This is taken from that book, Hymns from the Rig Veda. He was born in France in 1931. He studied Sanskrit in Columbia University. Next. This is the book from which I took that excerpt, that passage. Rig Veda Samhita is the title of the book. Next. The way in which Vedas were transferred, as I mentioned in the morning, even a single letter should not be altered. Several steps were taken to preserve the purity. Varnakshara padabhrashtam, matrasvara vivarjitam, that is a separate passage. Another, avaksharam anayushyam, visvaram vyadhipiditam, this is the passage given by Panini in his Shiksha Grantha. Therefore, even one varna or akshara or pada is bhrashtam, then it is a sin that we have committed. We have to do some prayashchitta for that. And prayashchittas are also prescribed. Even a matra, even a svara should not be omitted. Next. Next, please. Graham Hancock is the author of a number of best-selling investigations of historical mysteries, including The Sign and the Seal, that is the name of a book, Fingerprints of the Gods. He has written a book under that title. What is the most amazing about these hymnodies is not so much their overall length, which is awesome, but that for most of their history, it is probable that no written versions of them ever existed. Not because they could not be written down, but because they should not be written down. Next. Next, please. Markandeya Smriti says that Vedas cannot be modified even slightly. Next. Vedas should not be written, says Mahabharata. Next. 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 Another passage says that if you read Vedas after seeing a leaf, that is a book, then it is not only becoming waste, but it is also becoming dangerous. It is not only useless, it is harmful to read Vedas from a book. Now I am going to the third part, contents of the Vedas. This part will be completely new to you. Next. Erwin Schrödinger, the first name that I mentioned, the great Nobel laureate, he writes, the striving of all the scholars of Vedanta was, after having learned to pronounce with their lips, that is also important. It is not enough to learn the meanings of the Vedas. We should learn to pronounce with the lips. Ucharanam is important. Then after that, really to assimilate in their minds this grandest of all thoughts. Next. This is the famous Erwin Schrödinger. And next line gives the book that he has written. He was an Austrian physicist. He, in 1933, received the Nobel Prize for Physics for the formulation of the now famous Schrodinger equation. He also received Max Planck Medal, and there is an Erwin Schrodinger Prize in the Austrian Academy of Sciences. He also received Austrian Decoration for Science and Art in 1957. He's a renowned scientist. Next, I am going to Henry David Thoreau, 1817 to 1862, American philosopher, Unitarian social critic, transcendentalist, and writer. Next, he writes, "What extracts from the Vedas I have read fall on me like the light of a higher and purer luminary, Jyotis, Tejas, which describes a loftier course through purer stratum. It rises on me like the full moon after the stars have come out, wading through some far stratum in the sky." He experiences the Vedic pronunciation like this. In the great teaching of the Vedas, there is no touch of sectarianism. It is of all ages, all climes, and all nationalities, and is the royal road for the attainment of the great knowledge. Next, the veneration, that is the respect, in which Vedas are held is itself a remarkable feat. People are not worshipping books except the book of Vedas. Next, Friedrich Max Müller, German philologist, 1823 to 1900. Next, I maintain that for everybody who cares for himself, or cares for his ancestors, or who cares for his history, or who cares for his own intellectual development, for every such person, a study of Vedic literature is indispensable. You cannot do without it. You have to study Vedic literature if you care for intellect. Jacques, he worked as a government official in French India. Next, the Hindu revelation which proclaims the slow and gradual formation of worlds, that is step-by-step evolution, is of all revelations the only one whose ideas are in complete harmony with modern science. No other old books are in harmony with modern science. Next, Herman Melville, 1819 to 1891, he was a great American novelist. Next, he writes, "Vedas are mystical books whose perusal would seem to have been indispensable to Vishnu before beginning the creation." Vishnu used Vedas for the creation itself, and which therefore must have contained something in the shape of practical hints to young architects. It looks like a book of manuals, how to create the universe. Vishnu has to refer to Vedas. Next, Paul William Roberts, he was a lecturer in Oxford University. He is an award-winning television writer and producer in Canada. Next, he says the Vedas hold enough information to rebuild human civilization from scratch if necessary. Suppose the entire civilization is lost, only Vedas remain, then he says it is possible to reconstruct this civilization. Next, Count Maurice Maeterlinck, 1862 to 1949, was a Belgian poet and 1911 Nobel Prize for Literature. He is commenting on Vedic hymns. Is it possible to find in our human annals words more majestic, more full of solemn anguish, more august in tone, more devout, more terrible? Is it possible to find something other than Vedas which satisfy these characteristics? Next, this is Maeterlinck. Next, Sir John Woodroffe, another name, Arthur Avalon, 1865 to 1936, was the well-known scholar, and he came to the East, and he was an advocate general of Bangla. Next, an examination of the Vedic theses shows that it is in conformity with the most advanced philosophical and scientific thoughts of the West. And where this is not so, that is in places where the two do not agree, it is the scientist who will go to the Vedantist and not the Vedantist to the scientist. Next. Paul Thiem, 1905. He's a German Indologist. He says Vedas are noble documents, not only of value and pride to India, but to the entire humanity. Next. Dick Teresi is an American writer, present-day writer. He has written after 2000. This is taken from a recent book. He says these roots of modern science are available in India, were available in India long ago. Rig Veda asserted that gravitation held the universe together, and we are taught that it is Sir Isaac Newton's discovery. The Sanskrit-speaking Aryans subscribed to the idea of a spherical earth in an era when the Greeks believed in a flat one, and we are taught that this is discovered by Galileo. The Indians of the 5th century AD calculated the age of the earth as 4.3 billion years, and the same is the modern scientist's view also. Sir James Mackintosh, 1765 to 1832, is a British writer and philosopher. He also admires Vedas. The theory propounded by the Vedanta is refined, abstruse, ingenious, and beautiful theory of Upanishads. I am going to the fourth part of today's talk. Divinity of the Vedas. Vedas are divine. We will agree that Vedas are divine because we are followers of Vedas. But what do people from other religions say about the divinity of Vedas? I start from Prince Muhammad Dara Shikoh. He was Aurangzeb's brother, Shah Jahan's elder son. He has translated Upanishads into Persian language, about which our governor was mentioning in the morning. He is the author of that translation. Prince Muhammad Dara Shikoh, 1627 to 1658 AD, the favorite Sufi son of Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. What does he say? He says about Vedas, the first heavenly book and the fountainhead of ocean of monotheism. Monotheism is particularly emphasized because there was a wrong propaganda that Vedas are polytheist works. It is not so. In his Persian translation of the Upanishads, this prince writes, after gradual research, I have come to the conclusion that long before all heavenly books, including his own heavenly book, Quran, God had revealed to the Hindus through the rishis of yore, of whom Brahma was the chief. Brahma was also a rishi, in as far as he revealed Vedas. His 4 books of knowledge, the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda. God had revealed these 4 books. That is what that prince writes. Before going to the next, I will say a few more words about that princess. These ideas of his brother Aurangzeb did not like. Aurangzeb developed hatred towards his own brother. Therefore, he convened a meeting of Islamist priests, and with their concurrence, he beheaded his brother. His brother was killed because he was having such views. Now Hans Thorvaldsen, a native of Germany, now lives in Austria. Next. He has written a book, Heart of Hinduism. In that book, this quote is taken from that book. To the Hindu, Shruti is what cannot be thought up by the limited human intellect, but it is of God. It is what is forever valid, never invalid, never changes, is not dependent on the limited capacity for understanding of any one historical person. The Hindu, for this reason, is proud not to need a historical founder. The founder and foundation of the Vedas and the Upanishads is the Brahman itself, not the Brahman. Brahman, Supreme Soul, is what is indestructible and timeless. God is the founder of this religion. Next. This is the cover page of the book from which the previous quote was taken. Next. We believe that Veda is not different from God. Vedo Narayana Sakshat. We equate Veda to God. Next. I'm going to the last part, the fifth part of this talk. There are hidden meanings in the Vedas. Next. Rudolf Steiner, he is an Austrian architect. Next. He writes, what we read in the Vedas, those archives of Hindu wisdom, gives us only a faint idea of the sublime doctrines of the ancient teachers. Doctrines are more than the idea that we get. Even so, these are not in their original form. Only the gaze of the clairvoyant, directed upon the mysteries of the past, may reveal the unuttered wisdom. There is so much wisdom in the Vedic passages which we are not able to see, even if we see the passage there. May reveal the unuttered wisdom which lies hidden behind these writings. He believes that there are many layers of meanings to this. Next, in fact, we also traditionally believe so. Solange Lemaitre, in his book on Hinduism, writes, there is more than a purely literal meaning to be found in the Vedas. There should be more meanings in that. Next. Madhvacharya writes, Triarthatam Shrutishu Vitta Dashartham. For Vedic passages, there are 3 layers of meanings. Triarthatam. And he calls them Adhyatmika, Adhibhotika, and so on. But what we see is the first layer only. Or the Avalon writes, its more advanced concepts can be difficult for even the greatest scholars of the West to fathom. That is why it is unfathomable. It is very gambhira. Next. That is why Deshika says, Gambhiranam, not easy to grasp. Akritaka giram, not man-made. Gahate chittavrittim, its grand thought. There are other methods to grasp those grand thoughts. Next. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Yeah.
Thanks for the brilliant exposition, very inspiring. Now, how do we excite the generation next about the value of the Vedas? Kindly enlighten us.
These ideas to them through English language, because I find the younger generation, including my own grandsons, they do not know our language.
That's the case with all South Indian or any Dravidian language. Kannada people, they don't know Kannada. Telugu, they don't know Telugu. So it is happening everywhere. It's not necessarily for Tamil.
Sir, can I have a question, please?
But to make your question very short, we are
No, it's very common question. Sir, as you tell, it is so vast and wide and so much year old and all. If I want to start, from where I can start?
Even now there are many gurukuls, many Veda Patashalas. Only thing is we do not want our youngsters to start that kind of education.
Sir, you mentioned about different periods of Vedas. and he said it's not exactly known as to when it was written because there is a lot of variation. In that context, you mentioned about the books. Yes. May I know what actually is that book?
I took extracts from many books, one from Max Muller, one from Keith, one from MacDonald, and one more which I have not shown here is from Kajki and Wilson. Every one of them will give an age of Vedas, will make a proposal. At the end, they say it is only a Hashyam, conjecture.
Even I would like to ask one questions to all of our scholars, like how they ask from where to start. Is it many youngsters feel that we don't have anything on Sanskrit literature? So I would like to ask that what kind of steps would be taken to turn their minds and show the treasure we have in Sanskrit literature? I have this question.
Where do we commence? There is one easy solution for Bangaloreans. The Karnataka Sanskrit University is starting an evening course in BA in Sanskrit. So where the 3 core subjects are Sanskrit, and that offers an excellent introduction to the study of Sanskrit, and the qualification that is required is only your second year pre-university. And if you have some knowledge of Sanskrit in addition, it's welcome. Even otherwise, we start from the beginning, and the courses from the classes are from 5 to 8 in the evening. So Bangaloreans can make use of this opportunity. Those who are retired, those who are employed and can find time in the evening hours, they are most welcome. You can visit the website of Karnataka Sanskrit University and go to the evening college in that website. You will get all the details. So there you make a start with learning Sanskrit, and that can lead you to the Vedas. Thank you very much.